Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the beautiful Jessica Scott. Jessica, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here. How are you doing?
I am doing so well. I am so excited to have you here. A little bit about you for the people that don't know Jessica. She is a writer, editor, podcaster, and cosplayer with a passion for horror movies, which I love to hear. She's a content editor at Cred, and she has bylines at publications like Dread Central, Daily Grindhouse, Inverse, Ghouls Magazine, Certified Forgotten Film Cred, and many more. So even though people may not have known your face, they have probably read some of your stuff. So what got you interested in writing about the horror genre?
I've been a lifelong horror fan, and I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. But the story about how I got into writing about horror to me is funny, but sometimes people are like, when they hear it. So I was married at the time to a non-horror fan and was like talking horror all the time, right? And he was like,
see why it didn't work out.
Yeah, like he was like, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Why don't you start a blog so you can have an outlet for all this? And I was like, that's a good idea, actually. So I started a blog, We Who Walk Here, where I would just write about horror. And that's how I got into it. And during the pandemic, actually, was when I was like, you know what? I'm going to branch out and see if anybody else wants to hear what I'm writing about, wants to know what I'm thinking about horror. So I started reaching out to different publications and kind of started the ball rolling on my freelance career that way. And it's kind of grown from there, thankfully.
Well, I'm so proud of you to be able to take that step. And I'll again, my wife is a respiratory therapist. I would never say I'm happy about COVID or I'm happy about the lockdown or quarantine, but I am a silver lining type of guy, and a lot of positives did come out of such a negative, disgusting thing that's happened to this world. So I'm proud that you were able to take that opportunity, and not opportunity, that's not the word I'm looking for, that negative, and turn it into a positive in your own life. That's very cool.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah,
No problem.
It's been definitely a light in a lot of darkness going on. So yeah.
I definitely get that one too. That's when Sledgehammer Horror started, was during the pandemic. So I definitely understand.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough. My wife was like, hey, I do love talking horror, but I'm tired of talking about my first horror movie with you. So you should ask some other people about that. So another thing I do want to let everybody know, you don't have to just wait for me to update you about things that Jessica's doing, because all her links are down here in the description. So make sure you're shooting her a follow on social media. Make sure you're checking out the podcast. I'm very lucky to have met her and to be able to form a friendship. And I'm very excited for you to learn how horror started for her, because this is a movie that's very, very special to me as well. And for those that have watched this before, you know why this movie is so special to me. But before we talk about any more about the future, we got to go back to the past, Jessica, and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Jessica, your first horror movie was?
Poltergeist. Yeah.
Again, I've said it before and I'll say it a million times. Little Heather O'Rourke, Carol Ann. My kid sister looks just like Heather O'Rourke, and as kids, she had the long, silver blonde hair, and she would always it's amazing to me. Like that, I think that's why this movie is so special to me, because even now when I watch it to this day, Poltergeist 1 through 3, I marathon those a lot, and it just makes me think of my kid sister, because it looks just like her when we were kids. So do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
I was the same age as Carol Ann, actually. I was 5. Yeah. I hid behind the couch. My parents rented it. And I snuck into the living room, hid behind the couch, and watched it. And obviously was scared to death. But I was also in love with it. I was just enthralled. Like, what is this? I gave me a love of horror. It gave me a love of haunted house movies. And I was sold. I was just obsessed.
That's awesome. And I always feel like you watching as a young lady versus me watching Poltergeist as a young man, it's probably two different feelings that we get, just like you can relate more to Carol Ann, where I relate more to the brother. So with Carol Ann being your main focus in this franchise and in this movie in particular, I'm sure as a young lady, it's a little bit more affecting to watch as Carol Ann's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I didn't really think about it much until this last rewatch, because I rewatched it just because I love watching it, but I wanted to have it fresh in my mind for the podcast. And it didn't hit me until then that was the moment where I was like, I put myself in Carol Ann's shoes and I saw the darkness underneath this, idyllic suburb. And
Yeah.
that always resonated with me, this idea of darkness just underneath the life that looks perfect and looks
Mhm.
serene and happy and safe. And that is what I love so much about the horror genre, is finding the hidden things. So
Yeah.
that just dug into me really deep, because like you said, I saw myself in her, because
Mhm.
two 5-year-old girls just thinking life's perfect, and then
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's incredible because I've always said that horror has had social commentary, since 1968 with George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, even before then. But, even in something like Poltergeist, you have that perfect idyllic home, but the darkness that lies underneath all of that. There's always been this relatable, and I talk about this on here a lot. And I'm so sorry to sound like a broken record, but Candyman, the newest Candyman, I had a lot of people that were like, "Oh, I won't watch that woke shit." I'm like, "You've seen the original, right? Like, that woke is not starting right now. Like,
Right.
if you call a horror movie woke, in my opinion, I don't think you have the slightest idea of what the hell you're talking about."
No, no. Like you said, horror has always been political. Like Poltergeist is very clearly against, capitalism and this idea of these subdivisions where all the houses look alike, and it's just developers who don't care about the land that they're building on. They just want to get as much money as they can. Like, that's not even subtext really, because it's so blatant, So horror has always been political. You're totally right.
Yeah, and that's what I love about horror. Now, I don't like a movie that's just going to sit there and shove a message down my throat. I want you to be a horror movie first. That's always my number one. But anybody that's against a movie having a message to me is just one of the silliest things in the whole world. Like, that's what I watch for. I want to be entertained and I want to be informed. So
Yeah.
while we're getting informed, something I would like to know from you, Jessica, which scene was it from Poltergeist that affected you the most?
Oh my gosh. It was the scene where one of the researchers he's got a chicken wing in his mouth, and he grabs a steak out of the fridge, and it starts crawling across the counter like an inchworm. The steak is moving, and then he shines a flashlight on it, and all these maggots come out, and he spits out the chicken, and maggots come out of the chicken. And you would think it would be the clown scene or the moment immediately afterwards where he's peeling his face off, but no, it was the maggots coming out of the food for me that always stuck with me. Like, I still think about it from time to time, and I'm like, I'm not going to eat for a day or two because I just can't.
And I agree with you. Like, there's so many times, like, and I think it's because like this, the Lost Boys, like we'll go out to a Chinese restaurant and I'm like, ooh, rice about that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit there. So I get what I'm picking up what you're putting down there, Jessica, because
Yeah.
for me, it was the face afterwards. Like, holy shit. And that's still, I love that to this day. I mean, I would rather a stop motion practical effect like that than a lot of the CGI of what we have. And this movie has a lot of that. And I think that it's actually one of the more underrated practical effect movies, because whenever people talk about Poltergeist, it's always the curse of Poltergeist. Listen, anything that happened was not because of a curse. It happened because of, one, a medical misdiagnosis on a 12-year-old girl, which is super unfortunate, and a crazy, stupid son of a bitch that killed his girlfriend. That's the curse. It has nothing to do with a burial ground or real skeletons being used in the film during the pool scene. It has to do with a crazy human being and an unfortunate medical misdiagnosis. Like, please don't lump those things into a Indian burial ground and real skeletons being used on a film. Show the monsters for what they really are.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject of scenes, we know which one affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene from Poltergeist is?
Ooh. Gosh, there are so many to choose from. It's As a fan of creepy clowns, I've got to say maybe the clown scene, but I'm also a huge fan of the tree coming through and grabbing the brother. But I'm with you. I love all the practical effects. So anytime there's a practical effect, like I love that mirror scene, and anything with Zelda Rubinstein is gold.
Yeah.
So I'm not really answering your question, I'm afraid, because there's too many to choose from.
No, it's fine because it's funny. Like, these scenes you talk about, like the clown scene, obviously it's a very iconic scene. And that tree scene is another one that a lot of people think about when they think about this film. And what we forget is all these scenes add up to just an amazing movie. And this is a movie that has stood the test of time. And what I love about this movie is you don't get a bunch of gore and I mean, besides the face ripping scene, but you don't get a bunch of kills and a bunch of gore. You don't need that for this movie to scare you to the core. So I completely get what you're saying with that. Now, because there really isn't any kills in this movie, I can't talk about our favorite kill because that's not something that I can really do in this film. But a question I often ask, would you like to see this movie remade today? Now, with Poltergeist, obviously that has already happened. So have you seen the Poltergeist remake and what were your opinions on it?
I actually have not. I went through an unfortunate phase where I was like, oh, I don't want to watch remakes, which in hindsight was very foolish of me. But that's one I have not visited. There are a lot of remakes I love, but I've not seen that one. I There's something about the chemistry with that family, with Jo Beth Williams and Craig T. Nelson, with their chemistry is so good. I could just list the scenes where they're just being a normal family and goofing around as my favorite scenes because they make that movie what it is too. The remake might be great, but I just haven't seen it. I was gonna say I've heard it's not, but
just my opinion. Me and my wife, we did a top 10 least favorite horror movie remakes, and this was number one for me. And it has nothing to do. Look, I'm not smashing what they did, but it was just so beat by beat, and it was done with more CGI. Like it wasn't for me. I'll never shit on anybody's art. If you're making art, whether it's a remake, an original, you're writing, you're sculpting, you're drawing, you're making music, it's for somebody, and I hope that somebody likes it, even if that someone is not me. If you're making art, kudos to you, and I'm so happy and I'm so proud of you. But this art just wasn't for me. So I would never recommend you not watch a movie. Always base it on opinion for yourself. Yeah. But for me, it was not made for me. Now, I've had an amazing time talking about Poltergeist being your first horror movie. But now I want to kind of throw a curveball at you if I can. My little buddy ran off on me. I don't know where he ran off to. Oh, there he is. My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you, Jessica. What's your favorite scary movie, Jessica? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Okay, I always cheat when I get this question and give two answers.
I'll take it.
Okay, so original recipe on both, The Haunting and Suspiria. Those are my two favorite horror movies.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely.
So The Haunting, you're talking about the original.
Yes,
Haunting.
yeah, the one from 1963. Yeah. Okay. Again, I love haunted house movies. That's one of the best haunted house movies I've ever seen. It's just so gorgeous. The black and white, the camera work. It's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, which is not necessarily my criterion for my favorite horror movie, but I do love a movie that scares me. And Suspiria, I mean, God, the colors, the music, it's so gorgeous and so, unabashedly weird and just goes for it. I love that, my two choices are like the most colorful movie you've ever seen and a black and white haunted house movie, but those are my two answers.
And that's great because I think that nailing down a favorite is extremely hard. Because just like anything, it changes. We grow, we change, we become different people. Yeah. And like for the longest time, I would have said, number one for me will always be House from 1986. But after that, you've got Evil Dead 2, you've got Child's Play 3, Tales from the Hood. Like all these movies that shaped me into the man that I am today, that I know that sounds corny, but I would not by any stretch be the man that I am right now if it weren't for horror movies. Horror movies completely sculpted me. Horror movies and punk rock sculpted me into the human being that I am today. So, without Roger Cobb and Tom DeLonge, I wouldn't be the guy sitting in front of you right now. So much love to that forever. Now with Poltergeist, this is a franchise. You have the original trilogy and then the remake. We know you haven't seen the remake yet, but would you say the original is your favorite in this franchise?
You're going to hate me for this. I have only seen the original. I have not seen anything else in the franchise. Yeah, there are some franchises that I'm really playing catch up on. Like I recently I watched all the Texas Chainsaw movies. I had only seen the original and the Jessica Biel remake, and I watched the whole franchise. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
some hits, some misses. But yeah, I'm playing catch up on the Child's Play franchise. You know, everybody has got their blind spots and their movies that they just missed for whatever reason. And
Sure.
and I have heard such great things about Poltergeist 2. I haven't heard as much about Poltergeist 3, but I just those were ones that I missed for some reason, even though the original was so formative for me. So again, I'm given a terrible answer, but I've only seen the original.
I'm going to tell you this, and this is complete transparency. For me, the franchise, not counting the remake, gets better as it goes. The original is actually my least favorite in this franchise.
Wow.
3 is my favorite. 3, I think it's because 3 was the first one that I had seen in this franchise, and it's the one I watched the most as a kid. It has a weak ending, but anybody that knows the story behind it, Heather O'Rourke, who plays Carol Ann, unfortunately passed away during filming, and they were like, we don't want to do this, and the studio was like, we don't give a shit what you want. We filmed this much of the movie. You're going to finish this movie. So they just had to stand and come in and hold on to the end. I'm not going to spoil it for you because you need. I like it. It's my favorite. I think it's the scariest of the bunch too. Zelda Rubinstein comes back, reprises her role. It's a very good film, but the ending is weak. And you know, you watch these documentaries about it now, and they're like, we really wish that we would have stepped up and gave that movie a better ending for Heather, you know, to honor her. And once you realize it, like you could totally see, like throughout the film, like her cheeks are puffy, almost like a chipmunk because of all the medication she was having to take. Because she had a misdiagnosis. She had a sock in her stomach, and it's such an unfortunate thing to happen to a child, anybody, but a 12-year-old little girl.
Yeah,
it's just so unfortunate. But you need to text me after you watch Poltergeist 2 and 3 and let me know what you think, because I'm very intrigued to see it. Me saying that 2 and 3 I like more is not shitting on this franchise. 1 is amazing, but I just think, in my opinion, because I watched the other ones more as a kid, that they gradually got better, in my opinion. So, well, I've had an amazing time talking about horror with you, and I could do this all night long, I promise. But I know that you have things to do as well. So we always end this with the same question. We're going to stick with the original Poltergeist. And what we're going to do, Jessica, is we are going to rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not judging it on acting, production, directing, score, none of the above. What we're doing here is strictly judging this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls being the worst, not effective. 5 being the best, very effective. What would your ranking of Poltergeist be?
Gotta be 5 all the way. That was the movie that like rewired my brain and said, you're going to be a horror fanatic for the rest of your life. So 5 all the way.
It's so amazing. And it like I said, it is a very, very, very good movie, and it holds up today. Like the scene with the hand coming out of the TV is another one that, as a kid, like that scared the hell out of me. And once we're done here, I'll tell you about a scene from 3 that really, really got me too. Still gets me to this day, but please, like I said, don't go anywhere, Jessica. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, we're at the end of the 3rd act. The credits are about to roll. So before they do, make sure you're clicking these links down here in the description, giving her a follow on social media, checking out the podcast. I promise you her horror knowledge is invaluable. So make sure you're soaking that up. Until next time, guys, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.